whilst the first purpose-built escort vessel to fly the Stars and Stripes in the loose category of destroyer escort-frigate would be a River class that was transferred from the UK to provide a basis for the Tacoma class, the first destroyer escorts to enter US Navy service were actually designed in the US for the Royal Navy. It's a bit complicated. With British shipyards maxed out building new warships, escorts and merchant ships, whilst also trying to refit and repair ships that were worn out or being damaged by combat operations, in 1941 the British government asked the US, via the Lend-Lease programme, for escort ships. This was a separate request to the Destroyers for Bases deal of 1940. Somewhat unknowingly, this request stepped into the middle of a massive multi-year row within the USN. Back in 1939, one Captain Carney had suggested a small ocean-going escort that could be mass-produced, which could then free up destroyers for fleet duty. Initially, this had been rejected with the idea that the reserves of Wicks and Clemson class ships, whilst not ideal, could do a passable job, and those vessels had already been built and paid for. But now, with 50 of them sent to the UK in the aforementioned deal and general arguments on the idea as a concept raging, a variety of designs were put forward. It was suggested to take the smallest modern destroyer hull, the Farragut class, and simply update its systems. The reduction in weight would then allow for more anti-submarine warfare gear to be fitted. But that didn't quite work out, as the latest destroyer power plants in production wouldn't fit in the smaller Farragut class hull, and the resulting modifications to get them to fit would actually make the ship larger and more expensive. Various designs were drawn up, debated and revised, with the cost versus capability argument reaching a crescendo time and time again. At one point, 50 ships were ordered, and then the order was cancelled. Meanwhile, another captain, this one named Cochrane, had spent the time more productively looking over the wide array of escorts, from corvettes to sloops to frigates to escort destroyers, that the Royal Navy was throwing at the U-boat problem, and had come up with some ideas of his own based on this. Thus, when the British request to design and build them some more escorts came in, he was ready. Compared to many of the designs being thrown around, he dodged the bottlenecks of reduction gearing and 5-inch 38-gun production by using a diesel-electric drivetrain lifted from submarine production for propulsion and putting in a trio of 3-inch dual-purpose guns instead of a pair of 5-inch 38s. The ship would also have a tall open bridge, a British specification, as opposed to the enclosed bridge found on many small US warships. However, whilst the plan called for 8 diesel engines for 24 knots, the fact this power plant was shared with the submarine program, which was a high priority, meant that this had to be cut down to 4, which did at least mean the hull could be made shorter, and thus the ship would be even quicker to build and a little bit cheaper as well. The resulting ship displaced about 1,150 tons standard and was capable of 20 knots, using the just over 7,000 brake horsepower of the 4 diesels. Armour consisted of only some splinter-proof plating, whilst the ship's armament consisted of 3 single 3-inch guns, a pair super-firing forward and a single gun aft, along with a baseline armament of around half a dozen 20mm Oerlikons, depth-charge rails, depth-charge launchers, and a Hedgehog ahead-throwing launcher tucked behind the forward gun under a blast awning. No torpedoes were carried, despite Cochrane arguing strongly for at least one launcher set, an argument that he'd win with all subsequent destroyer escort designs. Needless to say, a variety of additional 20mm Oerlikons as well as 40mm Bofors or the occasional quadruple 1.1-inch gun mount made their way aboard various ships as the war went on. The first ships thus built in early 1942 would be designated BDE, or British Destroyer Escort, and duly sent to the Royal Navy, where they became the first of the Captain-class frigates. But with the US now fully involved in World War II, BDE-5 became DE-5, USS Evarts, and the majority of the production run would then remain in US hands. 105 ships were ordered, of which 8 were cancelled, 32 went to the Royal Navy, and 65 entered US Navy service. The ships flew off the slipways in near record time, taking around 6 weeks from keel laying to launch, sometimes less, although there was usually then about 4 months of fitting out before they were commissioned. Still, that was 5 to 6 months from keel to commission, whilst a Type 7 U-boat took around a year to go through the same process in the faster yards and up to 2 in the slower ones in Germany. Despite then going on to serve in either submarine-infested waters or latterly as small ships on the front lines, the Evarts class seemed to lead a charmed life. Although frequently damaged, especially by kamikazes, none of the US ships were actually lost, whilst 5 of the British version were sunk and 2 more written off, albeit all of them being hit by guided weapons, mostly acoustic homing torpedoes and one by an HS-293 missile, which were weapons a little bit beyond the design specification of an early 1940s anti-sub escort. But thanks to their relative small size, low speed and restricted armament when compared to later destroyer escorts, the Evarts class were gone almost as quickly as they appeared, all being scrapped within a couple of years at the end of World War II, with the exception of 2 vessels, Whiffles and Decker, which were transferred to the Republic of China as Tai Kang and Taiping, respectively. The former would hang around until the early 1970s, but the latter was sunk in battle with People's Republic of China motor torpedo boats in 1954.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.